Hello, guys. Welcome to Reinvented. I'm your host, Kayla, where we talk all things mental health. And today we are going to look at how chronic illness affects mental health. I have I have somewhat of an article. I might find another one, but somewhat of an article today. I didn't exactly grab my notebook for this to figure out what my whole outline was, but I wouldn't write much notes. So, um, But yeah, I was gonna do like two articles, but I might just go based off this one. So I did see a comment on at least our TikTok that said, you know, um, as to sharing my story to help others. So it is something that is really hard for me to talk about because I've in the last few years I actually do not enjoy talking about this at all because it's been kind of like a lonely and down point in my life where it's just been really hard. And especially when you know things are coming, but it's like that realization that it's going to hit sooner than maybe you would like it to. So, just also with that kind of being said, there may be some things that are a bit disturbing to other people. I'm not oblivious to this. That is probably going to be a bit disturbing. But if it spreads the word, then, I think, in all honesty, I think it will help. So I've had, obviously, as many people know who've watched my videos, I have stomach problems. I was diagnosed with GERD when I was a child, when I was like a little baby. That is nothing new, and that is honestly what doctors thought I had for years. And it kind of, to them, what they said was went away. But it came back in middle school of me just getting sick so randomly. Guys, it was so random. It wasn't like, oh, I'd eat something and then get sick. It was like I'd get up in the morning, maybe have some breakfast, and I couldn't even down any breakfast, and then I'd be 20 minutes from either like catching the bus or getting ready to leave for school or whatever, and I'd get sick. Um, and I was like, I didn't have to be like, yeah, I can't go to school because I can't stop throwing up, and I don't know what's wrong. So that was like never fun. Although, again, it was also brought up that it was probably just my GERD coming back, which again, at when you're like a young teenager, I I don't know from your guys' perspective, but I really didn't understand a whole lot about like I thought it was normal for people to get sick like this. And it wasn't actually until later in high school where people were like, that is not normal. Um, you should go see a doctor. But it was my normal. It was something that I had begun to grow so used to that I, it literally people looked at me like I was crazy when I would tell them I would just randomly get sick. Um, and then kind of fast forward a few years, I started having like the stomach problems got worse. Not so much that I was just throwing up, but I would eat and I'd be in physical pain. Um, I was having like some blockage. Everything it seemed like everything just stopped working. Um, a few things worked. I'm not going into full detail with that, but a few things worked. Like in more like over the counter pills that you can buy at a drugstore. But it became so bad. I was in so much pain. I'd eat anything, like anything I felt like I was eating, things I would normally eat. It just started hurting, and it became so hard that I started switching over to protein shakes in the morning because I could barely eat anything solid in the morning. But again, the doctors ruled it off as GERD. Um, Even as an adult, as in my early 20s, when I went to the doctor and said, "Hey, I don't feel like this is normal. Can we do something about this?" But they insisted it was just my GERD coming back and that it was normal. Um, so I had kind of adjusted. This thing has kind of went back to normal-ish. Like, again, there were times I'd just get randomly sick, and that happened for a few years. And then I kind of started researching, like, what um, my stomach problems could be, because at the time I was working a job where it was becoming clear to me I could barely handle their workload. I was like so dizzy, I could barely stand up. I was to the point where I just couldn't do anything. I was either getting really sick, so dizzy, practically like falling on my ass. Like I could not do anything. Um, and so when I started doing my own research, there were things I realized and found that were really overlooked and some things that were really strikingly similar. So I decided to go back to a doctor and fight for saying, "Hey, I think we need to do this to see if I have it." Um, and then obviously, like, they kind of went through. I got referred to a GI. All they told me was, "Well, it's something that's wrong with your stomach," and never really looked into it. So after a while, just was like, I don't see the point in trying to fight with doctors because they don't seem they want to listen. Um, and yes, I realize that is my fault on my end. And until recently, within the last few months, I started to realize that I was during like my time of month, I was getting really bad pain. Um, and that had happened, that had been happening for years. But again, I was told, oh, well, it's because at the time when I was like having the most pain, I was like a teenager, but I was told, oh, you'll grow out of it once you're older. Now, I realize that I'm not that old, but I'm old enough to the point where it should have stopped, where the pain shouldn't be as bad. But it's still very much there, and was still very much getting sick to the point. Um, Back in August, I ended up needing to be taken to the hospital in an ambulance because I could not stop throwing up, to the point where it was lowering my potassium so much that I was practically paralyzed and fainting. Not a fun experience. Don't I didn't realize that could happen. I know that now. Um, but it was so bad to that point. Um, and even though nothing really came of that, I again started research, and these same problems that were affecting me were starting to then bleed in, kind of bleed into that per se. And I was like, okay, I think I know what I have, but it is trying to get the doctors to listen. Um, and that's still a very much an ongoing battle for me, is trying to get them to listen. Of like, okay, something is severely wrong here. Um, and even though it's not the steps I want to take, it's the steps I'm inevitably going to have to take. So, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna start, actually, I think, kind of documenting this whole kind of journey of like, I know I know deep down in my gut what it is. It's just more about trying to fight for the right to, in a sense, kind of have my life back, because I have gotten to the point where I'm just like, I'm so fatigued. It's so hard to do anything sometimes, and sometimes even like in extreme heat, I am just dying when it's not even that bad of like heat. Like, it's like I've done 90-degree weather before, and I've gotten to the point where I'm just like, okay, like I can barely do it. I can barely be outside for that long. So, um, it's something that I realize now, sharing my story, it's gonna, people aren't gonna like that. And that's okay. because it's not their story. It is mine to tell. And I am kind of excited. I'm not so much excited, but I want to start kind of documenting, like, my journey of like finding what works for me. But it has gotten to the point where I know what it is. But it's now having to fight for the the answers and the ways to continue to keep going. So yeah, anyway, we're going to kind of get into the article of how it affects mental health. Obviously, you heard my point of view from it, but there is, I do have the AI overview here of chronic illness can significantly impact mental health, often leading to increased stress, anxiety, and depression. The physical and emotional challenges of managing a chronic condition, along with potential lifestyle changes and the impact on daily life, can contribute to psychological distress and mental health problems. Here are more detailed look at the impact. Increased stress and anxiety, higher risk of depression, social isolation, and low self-esteem. And especially you hear a lot of like social isolation with it because of the fact that it's something that is so like it's like there's times you can't get out of bed, and I've definitely had those days where it's like I can't get out of bed to do anything. So difficulty adjusting to changes, um, co co not say co-occurring mental health issues. Sorry, I could not read that for the life of me. What does that say? Impact on quality of life, need for integrated care. So yeah, I do hope you guys kind of enjoyed this like mini episode. I know it's not exactly the most like upbeat thing to talk about, but I do hope you guys enjoy.